Good evening and welcome. As June said, I'm Hannah Kimberley, a Gloucester resident and the president of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann. And we're very pleased to bring you a debate between the 6 of the 7 candidates for 2 open seats on the Board of Selectmen this evening. Mark your calendars because the election is May 15th. It would be horrible if you showed up here tonight and then did not go vote. The League is a nonpartisan political organization for women and for men, despite its name, which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. One way we do this is by presenting candidates directly to you, the voters, in a fair and equal format. And we hope that over the course of this program, you'll be able to learn more about each candidate and what they hope to do for the town of Rockport. So now I'm going to introduce the candidates. Michael Roskowski was unfortunately unable to participate in tonight's debate. So next we have Wally Hess, who graduated from Bowdoin and earned his master's degree. Bowdoin, sorry. Which is in Dartmouth.
Oh, that's why.
He spent 40 years in business in the Boston area, serving as chief financial officer of 2 companies. After purchasing a home in Rockport in 2003, he has served 8 years on the finance committee, developing a close working relationship with town departments. And he is a Vietnam veteran. Our next candidate is David Dwinelle, who grew up in Danvers, the grandson of selectmen and son of a firefighter. He worked in many aspects of property management and real estate before he served 25 years in the Postal Service. Having spent 4 years in the Strategic Air Command, David is an active supporter of veterans, volunteering at the Chelsea Soldiers Home, Rockport American Legion, and Welcome Home Committee of the Elks. Then we have John Pealosa, who is a Rockport resident for 18 years with a degree in economics, and he's worked for 25 years in information technology, developing and managing innovative solutions for companies. He has a background in journalism as well and has been active in local, state, and national politics as a registered Democrat. Ruth George has lived in Rockport all her life and graduated from Rockport schools. She earned her nursing degree from Boston University and worked as an emergency room nurse and manager at Addison Gilbert Hospital for 44 years. Semi-retired, she works for Emergency Department Physicians Group, doing quality assurance and private duty nursing. She has served as chair of the Rockport and Northeast chapter of the American Red Cross, chair of the Rockport Housing Authority, and is currently the chair of the town's Community Preservation Committee. Next we have Michael Paulson, who has been a commercial fisherman since 1965. He is the director of the CACFL Fund. Is that it?
Commercial Fishermen's Loan Fund.
Great, for 15 years. He was a harbor advisor for 10 years. He's the past president of the PCFC. Great. And the past president of Atlantic Lobster Cooperation. He's been a business owner since 1977, and he co-negotiated for purchase of the Pigeon Cove Harbor by Pigeon Cove fishermen and transfer to the town of Rockport. All right, great. And then lastly, but not least, we have the incumbent, Sarah Wilkinson, who was first elected to the Board of Selectmen in 2006 and is currently serving her 4th term as chair. She's been the liaison to the school committee, finance committee, police department, public works, the Council on Aging, and the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Sarah grew up in Rockport and received her BS from UMass Amherst and her MBA from Suffolk University. She owns her own bookkeeping and property management business and is active in the Rockport PTA, the Mass Municipal Association, and women elected municipal officials. Okay, so There's no formal opening statements from the candidates, but there will be 2-minute closing statements. And I will be asking questions that were prepared by the League of Women Voters, which the candidates have not seen. If you want to take part in creating the questions at the next debate, you should join the League of Women Voters. The format will be to discuss each question for about 10 minutes. The first 2 speakers may talk for 2 minutes each, and the remaining candidates for 1 minute each. Since our goal is to include as many different issues as possible, I will ask the candidates to keep to specific subject of each question. And the woman in the plum shirt in front of you, candidates, right there in the first row with the scarf waving, is your timekeeper. She will, you may. That's such a great suggestion. Will you please silence your cell phones? Mine is silenced. I'm good to go. All right. Our first question. Rockport demographics have been steadily changing. We have a growing population of elderly, a declining population of young families with children, and an increasing number of properties bought as vacation homes, whose owners do not work in Rockport. What actions, if any, should the town take to either adapt to or counteract the demographic trend? What, if anything, should the town do to reach the state goal of 10% affordable housing? And we'll start with Mr. Pealosa.
Excuse me. So somebody must have read my mind, because this is exactly the core issue I think is affecting Rockport today, and it's affected the town ever since I moved here in the year 2000. Rockport is very much being buffeted by the winds of change that are affecting the country and the world as a whole. There's increasing income inequality that affects different communities in different ways. In Rockport, we primarily have an interesting place to park money from elsewhere in the United States. So people feel like they can buy waterfront homes and maybe forget about them, and it's just a perfect place to leave that. The downside of that is that our community is increasingly being gentrified and being hollowed out by this dynamic. Now, we can choose to stand back and say, this is inevitable, this is just the way things are, we have to roll with it and see what happens to our community, or we can take active steps to counteract it. One of the main proposals that I feel would be important would be to follow in the steps of the footsteps of other Massachusetts communities that have adopted residential exemptions for property tax for residents. So the way that would work in Rockport is, if you live in Rockport and own property in Rockport, you would pay a regular property tax rate. And you would also be eligible for an exemption, which the Board of Selectmen can vote in, of as much as 20%. If you are from out of town, then you would pay the higher tax rate.
Okay.
And that could generate additional revenue.
I'll have to stop you there. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Dwinelle, you're next.
My first solution, and of course it would be voted on and acted on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'm not from the phone company. I'd just like to say I think we have a perfectly good thing built into the school system, where we can have more people coming in from the outside, which we do to some degree now. The idea is to bring people in without having to worry about can they afford to move in or not, as long as they can pay their tuition. And I think this would be one of the solutions. It would go on from there with trying to get more housing, but that's going to take quite some time to activate and get people interested in. We seem to be losing everybody that's ever grown up in the town and didn't have a choice if they wanted to stay. They're living in adjoining communities or they've moved on. And they're not part of a corporate system where they move around to go up the ladder. So that's my thought on that, and I hope that I was clear and you could hear me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hess.
Hi, this is a fundamental problem and situation that Rockport is in. Rockport's not unique in having an average age which is going up. We happen to be extreme compared to the average town in Massachusetts. I've spent a lot of time on the Finance Committee analyzing and making reports on these trends. I get a report every year, and we put together all the graphs that you see in our report. Fundamentally, there's not a lot we can do. We need to adjust the services, and we need to adjust the look of town to appeal to this older age group. And the town right now definitely does appeal to that older age group, and I don't think we ought to be changing the way it looks.
Okay, Ms. George?
Yes, being on Community Preservation Committee, excuse me, I'm very sorry. Being on Community Preservation, we're very concerned, the Community Preservation Committee, we're very concerned in affordable housing and having the housing for people in town. Living here all my life, it's very interesting about all the summer residents and the summer houses and the influx of people not living here. I grew up on the headlands in Rockport, and most of the time, half of the houses were not lived in. They were summer houses back then. So not much has really changed in the years I've been here. I think we need to have affordable housing for young families. The superintendent of schools, I met with him. He has a great idea that they have up in Mount Desert Island in the communities up there, working with properties around town to put in an affordable housing for people who work in town.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Well, this whole question all boils down to one thing. It's all about the money. These people, they've worked somewhere else all their life. They've amassed a ton of dough in the bank. And where do they want to spend it? They want to come down to Rockport. They want to buy a cute little summer house here, and they stay here most of the year, and then they head to Florida the rest. But the problem is they don't want to support the schools because all their kids are grown up. So it affects our school system. And it also affects the amount of money that a person has to buy for a house. They come in and they don't even haggle a realtor for the price. They just buy it, half them tear it down with a bulldozer, and build some monstrosity. And as far as affordable housing goes in Rockport, there is no such thing as affordable housing in Rockport, because when you look at the average home, what it's worth, even at 30% of that, it's not affordable to the young people like my kids and the kids of the rest of the people here that really would like to live in this town. They can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of you had mentioned the schools. Oh,
You
I'm
missed
so
one.
sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You can't see me down here.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I disagree with the residential exemption. I've looked into it, and I know it's very controversial. I think right now 14 communities in Massachusetts have enacted it. But unfortunately, what it does is it pits summer residents versus year-round residents, which is the opposite of what we want to do. Many of the summer part-time residents I know, and actually all of them, are just as committed to and as invested as year-round residents are here. And they love Rockport just as much as we do. I feel that strong schools build a strong community, and in order to strengthen the town, we have to strengthen our school system. I was with the superintendent and the head of the planning board and the head of the school committee, and we actually traveled up to Mount Desert Island just a few weeks ago, and we met with and really explored and are moving forward with modeling an affordable housing trust. But it's not affordable housing that you picture, it's moderately affordable housing. So it would attract, sorry, I'll get into it more later.
Okay, well, we're moving on to the schools, actually. So that's our next question, is despite declining enrollments, school costs, especially special education, continue to rise, which creates periodic overrides. What, if anything, should the town do to address this trend? And we'll start with Ms. George.
I think one of the things we need to do is try to increase affordable housing for our kids, for our families to live in town. Our school choice is working well in town for right now. It began with 150 students when the superintendent began here, and now it's up to 250 school choice students to help offset the costs. And they're only used in classrooms that have empty seats. So we're not adding teachers, we're filling seats that are vacant in a classroom. And that's very important. We want to have the classrooms full. We want to have the teachers teach to the greatest number of students they can and give those other students the opportunity to come to Rockport and mingle with the Rockport kids and learn from Rockport. Rockport has so much to offer. And we always need to keep the choice open. Again, I've been here all my life. Regionalization has been talked about for 40 or 50 years. It will sometime come to pass probably for Rockport, like it did for Manchester, Essex. We have to be open to anything. Not that it's going to happen in the near future, but it's an important thing to keep all options open, to keep our schools viable, because they are excellent, and we have excellent, excellent teachers that I support.
Okay, and Mr. Paulson.
Unfortunately, the town doesn't have any control over special education. The state mandates what you have to supply, what you have to pay, and what each individual student that has whatever type of special need they have so they can get a quality education. There's nothing we can do to stop that in Rockport. The best we can do is try our best to make sure that these kids that need special help get the help so they can become, quality people in our community. And the Community Preservation Act, does some help for affordable housing, but not much. And the biggest expense we have in town is our schools. And the answer for SPED I already said, but school choice is not a plus for the town of Rockport. It's a negative. For every student that we take in from school choice, we get $5,000 from the state of Massachusetts or from their hometown to cover it. Yet it costs us $15,000 to educate them. So for every student we bring in here to fill a seat, it costs us $10,000. That's just not good economics. Granted, when our kids go somewhere else, they get the same situation. They get an education in another school for $5,000 that we provide, and the recipient town a city has to take care of it. But it really doesn't help Rockport to be doling out this kind of money to help, educate kids from out of town. We should be focusing on the kids in our own town. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Wilkinson.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. I'm a huge proponent of the school choice program. I have two children in the elementary school. One's in first grade, one's in fourth, and close to a quarter of both of their classes are filled with school choice children. And as Ruth stated earlier, we use school choice to fill empty seats, not to bump Rockport children. And then as they get older, the benefit is that we are then able to offer classes and more electives and choices that we simply could not offer if we only had Rockport children. The other thing is my kids they absolutely love that there are kids from Gloucester, Essex, other communities. Their elementary school class, and in Rockport I think first grade has 60 kids, is close to a quarter of other Cape Ann kids, and that's more families. It's more kids participating in sports, more kids doing the Motif #1 day race. We'd go to Gloucester, we meet other families. It could not be more of a benefit, but I understand the cost of it, and that's where we have to look at it with attracting other young families to school, because it's kind of a short-term fix to a larger-term problem.
Okay, Mr. Hess?
Yes, the schools are definitely the biggest issue that we have here, as we've mentioned earlier, we have this declining population. A year ago it was 910, now it's about 650, and it's headed towards 500. It's a problem that we need to solve, and we have, when the Finance Committee did a forecast of the next several years, we recommended that we put together a study group for this and hire a professional who has dealt with this kind of issue from other towns. I have a very close relationship with Rob Lebo, the superintendent. We worked starting 4 years ago to avoid overrides ever since by putting together a very predictable and organized outlook for the school finances. It's worked very well. We really, however, need to come up with a long-term solution.
Okay. Mr. Pealosa?
The decline in the school-age population in Rockport is a combination of a decline in the quality of the schools. In the time I've lived in Rockport, when we moved here, Rockport schools were like in the top 25% rated of Massachusetts public schools. Now we've fallen below the 50% range. We're in the bottom half of Massachusetts schools in terms of quality. That is one factor. The other factor is that there is no affordable housing left in Rockport for families with school-age children. So unless we take measures to turn back those demographics, we're not going to be able to repopulate our schools. And I think the schools are absolutely vital for a community to have a vibrant social fabric. The reason we live in Rockport is because of this community, and we can't afford to risk that and become only a vacation community.
Okay. Mr. Dwinelle?
As far as the school systems go, I kind of narrow it down to the school site. When we first moved here, it was a small building, and now it's become a complex. And it's a good complex. However, there's other outstanding expenses basically operating this physical site. That goes anywhere from lights that go off when they're not being used, improving, insulating, and trying to cut the money back that way.
Okay. Thank you. Someone mentioned regionalizing the high school with Gloucester, which made me curious. So I'm going to ask you all to weigh in on that. We don't have time for more than a yes or no, but for the question of regionalizing school with Gloucester, a yes or no. Ms. George?
Well, I was the one who mentioned that, and it's not a regionalizing with Gloucester. It's
Okay.
probably looking at regionalizing with something like Essex Manchester,
Okay.
a small community school, and leaving elementary schools here and regionalizing middle and high school like they do in Manchester, Essex. And that would be way down the line, and that's something that has been talked about for over 40 years,
Okay.
on and off.
So regionalizing with another high school. We'll leave it at that. How about you, Mr. Paulson? Yes or no?
Positively not.
Okay.
We need to support our own schools in our own town. It's the only way that we can control the costs and
Okay.
the education of
Great.
our
Yeah.
students.
Yes or no? You say no.
You gave her a little extra time, why not me?
You
know, a little fairness here.
You're good. You're good. Ms. Wilkinson, yes or no?
No, I mean, dare I say, I think I agree with Mr. Paulson on something.
There you go.
Okay. Mr. Hess, yes or no?
I agree with Ruth George on this. We should regionalize. We're probably going to have to regionalize. I don't think there's a lot of options, and probably not with Gloucester. Manchester, Essex would be better.
All right. Mr. Pealosa?
Absolutely not. We would lose our autonomy and some of the most important things that make our schools interesting, which is like the music program, and I'd actually like to go in the other direction and make us a magnet school.
Thank you. Mr. Dwinelle?
No.
Okay, thank you, especially.
Nice job.
You won for that question.
No, you did it.
My next question is on infrastructure. Rockport's beaches, wharves, seawalls, and roads took a beating in this winter's nor'easters, as you know. What should the Board of Selectmen do to develop long-range plans to cope with ocean rise and storm intensity? And how can the town fund large infrastructure projects and emergencies? But please don't talk about Long Beach. That'll be the next question. Let's start with Ms. Wilkinson, please.
Oh, good, you get it first.
Gee, thanks. But we're not supposed to talk about Long Beach in this one?
You can on
No,
question
no.
for it.
It honestly doesn't matter. I think that it's important in today's day and age. The amount of money that we have to invest over the next several years is in the millions of dollars. Like there's no way around it. We are lucky to live in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and most of that is because we're on the ocean. Because of that, it's expensive, and infrastructure is very expensive here. We are currently working with our state and federal legislators on seeing what types of emergency funding we can get for the storm damage. The Board of Selectmen I think the second storm in January, we declared a state of emergency, which makes it so that if any federal funding becomes available, we will be eligible for it. That state of emergency is still open because we are daily finding more and more damage. And just this past weekend, we had significantly more damage to Long Beach, which you may have seen. So I think that we need to look at it on a local level, and we need to invest local funds. We need to work with our legislators to get state and federal funds. And we also, in this year's budget, have found a way to fund a grant writer more than half time on a consulting basis, and I think we need the grant writer to really spend a huge amount of time looking into grants for coastal infrastructure, because it is a number that's only going to keep getting bigger.
Okay, Mr. Hess?
Yes, you touched on a very difficult problem for this town. If you look out over the next several decades, we're going to see rising sea levels. I think most people agree with that. We're going to have more situations like we saw this last winter, where some of our major wharfs were actually underwater. We need to do an organized analysis of not only all of our waterfront issues, but we own 22 buildings in addition to the buildings and real estate associated with the water and sewer operations. And we have obviously miles of roads. Those are very large consumers of money, and it's going to continue to get larger unless we get our arms around it. So my suggestion would be to put together a very well organized study of all of the components. Some of those studies have been started. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the Finance Committee recommended strongly that a study of at least the buildings be done. We appropriated money for that study. Not much happened, really. This is something where the selectmen really need to grab onto this problem and come up with a series of things that need to be done on a priority basis. This is going to be hard. It's going to take debt. It's probably going to take a little bit of increased taxes. Much as I don't like taxes, I think that real world, we have to do that if we're going to protect our community and keep it the way it is.
Okay. Mr. Pealosa?
Well, unlike demographic changes, there's no rolling back the wave of climate change. It doesn't make sense to keep sinking money into susceptible infrastructure and then absorbing those as losses when the next 50-year storm hits within a decade. We've seen it over and over again. Even staying away from Long Beach, as a primarily coastal community, we need to develop a comprehensive approach to spending the money in such a way that we're going to expect that infrastructure to be around for the good of the town.
Thank you. Mr. Paulson?
Well, there's no getting around it. You know, we seem to be getting bigger storms and more often. And the only thing that we need to do is we need to take a proactive approach to this type of thing. We know it's coming. And to do more to look at the situations where we're having these problems, the wharves and some of the breakwaters, and do what's necessary to repair them. The biggest problem we have in doing this type of stuff to our wharves and our coastline is that we end up in battles with the environmentalists. There's plenty of ways that you practically can repair some of this stuff that'll last a hell of a lot longer. But the problem is, when you got the environmentalists saying, oh no, you can't do that, some salamander might get crushed. You know, is it better to have somebody's house go overboard with a bunch of kids in it? Thank you.
Mr. Dwinelle.
I'll start with Front Beach and Back Beach. There's been improvements made. However, the water seems to have a mind of its own. So we're headed in the right direction, and I think we really have to spend some money on that. Again, that probably cost me a few votes. But the thing is, that's where we are. Life is rolling on for all of us. We'd like to leave something to the future generations. And I think a good start would be, without mentioning any area names, get out of the real estate landlord business.
Ms. George?
I think one of the major things we have to do is protect our coastline at any cost. I think we need to be very well versed in grants from FEMA. 75% of was paid for by FEMA to do the Pigeon Cove Wall. That was a beautiful job they did there. And we need to be proactive, like Mr. Hess says, in figuring out what infrastructure needs to be done and on a time schedule and looking at it for the next 10 to 15 years and working that and looking at that. It can be very costly, but there are sources of funding out there, state and federal. Federal is only if it's a disaster, but we need to know about the different state grants available, and our part-time grant writer would be great in that job.
Okay. The next question. Even repairing a small segment of the Long Beach seawall will cost millions of dollars. What is your vision for the long-term future of Long Beach? We'll start with Mr. Paulson.
That's an easy one. That's an easy question. We need to get out of the real estate business. We should make a reasonable offer to those people who own all those homes down there, divvy up the land, and come to a reasonable settlement with those people so they own the stuff. And as far as the damage to the break to the wall that's there, because the town still owns it right now, we should probably absorb a portion of what it costs to repair it in the same process of transferring all this ownership out of town hands. Take all the money and put it in the long-term fund, and we can use it better than getting in lawsuits and having fights with, people that just want to have a nice home down by the beach. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pealosa.
I'm also amazed that I'm in agreement with Mr. Paulson on this issue. I think we do, for the financial welfare of the town, we do need to get out of the real estate business on Long Beach. I don't think it's sustainable. I think there's going to be increasingly huge nor'easters that we're going to deal with, and they're fun to put up on Facebook and see when they're going by, but then when we get the price tag for them, it's going to be a big sticker shock for everybody. So I think we need to deal responsibly with that now.
Ms. George?
I agree. I do feel that we need to have a good assessment of the area to maintain our beach. That Long Beach is our Rockport beach, and I don't want that to just be sold off part and parcel with the lots down there. I want to make sure that Rockporters have good, equal access to our beach down there.
Mr. Dwinelle?
Interesting. I'll just say that I agree in general with most of the statements made already. It's a very tough thing to decide, and the more people we get out, coming to meetings like this, voting, and then that leaves 363 other days that everybody needs to be aware and involved.
All right, Mr. Hess.
You've hit on one of my favorite topics here in town. I've been involved in studying and organizing how we think about this since November of 2011. We are now about halfway through a 10-year lease. We have to we have to make a decision about exactly what we're going to do, and that involves how we deal with the infrastructure problems, the wall being part of it but not the whole thing. We need to deal with the tenants. We need to give them plenty of opportunity, plenty of time. So we ought to give them notice of exactly what we're going to do sometime within the next year, so they'll have 5 years to adjust to that. But in general, we either need to very significantly increase the rent so that we have enough cash flow to handle everything, or we need to sell to the tenants. There's a Massachusetts law regulation that defines exactly how you do that in both cases. The land underneath those cottages is worth $75 million.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you. I couldn't disagree more actually about Long Beach. I think that that's just a guess that the land is worth $75 million. It would be a long, drawn-out process. And in my opinion, selling the land underneath the cottages would be akin to giving away a mile of oceanfront property. If you drive to Nantucket, it's really hard to find a place where you can go to a public beach and walk that length of beach. We are lucky enough to still have that here. In 2013, the Board of Selectmen, which I was on, we actually had the guts to redo the Long Beach land leases and make close to market rents. In fiscal year 18, this current fiscal year, the rent we are taking in from those land leases, which doesn't include property taxes, is $1,072,389. So that's about $1 million more than we were taking in just a few years ago.
Okay.
And that will increase.
We'll move on to the next question. Your town administrator is on extended sick leave, and you have an interim administrator. What process would you follow, and what qualities would you look for in hiring your next permanent administrator? Does the town need an assistant town administrator and/or a human resources director? And we'll start with Mr. Dwinelle.
I came from a town, as you heard, Danvers. My whole life, that town changed in 1949, I believe, to the town manager business and elected town meeting members. I'm all in favor of that, and it's, of course, not that simple, but it certainly tightens things up, and we don't have small number of attendants until someone gets what they think they wanted, or they don't, and then we're without a quorum. So that's my answer, town manager.
Okay. Ms. Wilkinson.
Sure, I would support, in my opinion, I believe that if we have a capable town administrator, that we would not need an assistant town administrator. I also, in the past, the human resources position has been a small stipended position. I think that can also be folded in. Right now, we have one person doing both jobs, and it's actually going perfectly fine. In my opinion, when we do the actual search for the full-time town administrator, we would set up a search committee like we've done for other positions in town, made up of selectmen, other committee members, and members of the public, and do a full and open process where applications are accepted from internal and external candidates. They're fully vetted. Usually, in the past, like 3 candidates or some number like that are sent to the Board of Selectmen, and then final interviews are done in public, and then the person will be chosen.
Okay. Mr. Paulson?
Well, I think right now, Mr. Mitch up there in the back corner, he's doing a super job. And it kind of bothers me that our current administrator has been out so long without giving her notice or retiring or just leave. I mean, the town of Rockport has to function. I am commiserate with her illnesses and stuff, but you know, the town of Rockport has to function first. And I don't think we need an assistant with a good administrator, whether it's Mitch or somebody else, whoever they hire, can do an adequate job without an assistant. And as far as human resources go, we should have a human resources committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen, with no town employees involved, so that the people who get hired for this town, it's fair, equitable, and transparent. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pealosa.
I think we do need to hire a professional town administrator who brings experience perhaps from another town or other capacity as an administrator. I think we should look to the model of how we hired the current chief of police, Chief Horvath, which I think was an excellent process, was transparent, and was accessible to all of the citizens of the town.
All right, Ms. George.
I do agree. I think we do need a town administrator. I'm not convinced that we need an assistant, but I do think we need to separate out a human resource manager. I think that's a very delicate position for someone to be in, for employees to go with human resource issues to someone confidential. It's very hard to go to maybe someone who is the town administrator and get that back to your department or whatever. So I think that needs to be a sensitive, separate job description.
Okay, Mr. Hess.
Yes, I think we need to get a commitment from the retiring town administrator very quickly that she is retiring, so that we can start this process sooner rather than later. We ought to go and interview a number of administrators. My opinion is it'll be very difficult to find somebody better than Mitch Vieira, who has done an outstanding job at taking over on short notice, and he knows a lot about the town. As far as human resources director is concerned, I think we can do that with a part-time professional, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. We don't need a full-time person for that. We need someone who is trained in that area. Probably shouldn't be all just volunteers.
Okay, our next question. Your May 15th ballot will have a referendum question on banning establishments which produce and sell non-medical, i.e. recreational marijuana. How do you plan to vote on this question? I'll ask you to answer yes or no. And then if the ban fails and a store must be permitted, does the town need to do anything beyond the regulations passed at town meeting? We'll start with Ms. George.
I am opposed to a marijuana store downtown or any place in Rockport. I think medical marijuana facilities are fine in a business district like a mall someplace, but not in a quaint seaside town. I think if we end up having to have it in Rockport, I think we need very strict regulations of where it's going to be and how it's displayed, and keep on it. I think this is a danger, being an emergency room nurse, for children to get into edible marijuana foods, and it's going to be very enticing for children to get into that. And how are you going to hide it when you have it at home? It's a real problem that we don't want to face in this town. Thank you.
Mr. Dwinelle?
I am not in favor of a pot store. I think we've got all the pots we need in the ocean.
Good one.
Ms. Wilkinson?
Oh, that was a great answer. I'm opposed to non-medical marijuana shops right now. I do think that within the next few years, there will probably be non-medical marijuana shops everywhere. But my view is we certainly do not need to be first. I know that the police chief is concerned about additional cost to his department. I know there are zoning regulations, there are permitting regulations. It will be a headache. It is so new in the state. I was before town meeting reading the new state manual for municipalities, and they're basically kind of like, good luck. And honestly, we don't need the luck right now. We'll let Manchester or someone else start. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll reconsider in a few years. But at this point, I'm opposed to it.
Okay, Mr. Hess.
I agree with Sarah on this. A lot of people have asked me, gee, you're on the finance committee. Why would you walk away from the big percentage you can get from marijuana sales. My answer to that is we don't know the effects yet of having a store in this town. So there's no way we can determine the cost. I think the police chief made a very good pitch at town meeting as to why it would be very expensive, and he is probably right. So I think that we should just wait and see and not have a marijuana store in town, at least for the foreseeable future.
Okay, Mr. Paulson?
Well, personally, I am opposed to a pot shop in Rockport, but unfortunately, for everybody and all you people in the room here, the town of Rockport voted to allow it. Now the state says you can't ban it. So, you know, the people who supported it, 65% I believe was what the vote was, you're going to have to live with it. You know, everybody is painting it as a most horrid thing to have marijuana around. And half the homes in town have probably got pot in their house. As far as a store, the town of Rockport should have the only store. The town of Rockport should run it, and then we get the money from it.
Yikes.
Well, hey, gotta tell it like it is.
Okay. Mr. Pealosa?
As far as I understand from the presentations at town meeting recently, even though Rockport population did vote in favor of the marijuana proposal, we still have the ability to pass a ban at our upcoming election. So in the meantime, I'm personally voting against it. I think it's important for us to uphold the will of our voters. I don't know whether a lot of people wanted it in general decriminalized, which was my impetus behind supporting the state measure, but personally in Rockport, I would not like to have a recreational shop. I think Chief Horvath makes an excellent point that we send mixed messages to the thousands of visitors that come every summer if we have a legal recreational shop downtown, and then we say, okay, where can you go smoke it in Rockport, right? We don't want that situation potentially polluting the image and the reality of our recreational activities.
Okay, our next question. Selectmen have been criticized in the past for not serving as liaisons between the board and various committees. How would you work with the town's many volunteer committees? And we'll start with Mr. Hess.
One of the places that I have a lot of experience is in liaisons, since I've done this in the Finance Committee for 8 years. I've been the principal liaison to the schools and to most recently public safety, among others. I think that it is very important for the selectman liaison to really get deeply involved in what's going on with the department that he or she is working with. That means going to all the meetings that have anything to do with the main topic of what that department is doing. And I think that needs to be reported back to the rest of the members of the Board of Selectmen, either informally or in public meetings. The selectmen need to get a little bit more involved in what's going on with some of the underlying committees. It's very important in keeping things under control in this town.
Okay, Mr. Paulson?
Aha, this is a good one. I've been on some committees in town, and the last one that I was on was the Harbor Advisory. We spent months and months interviewing different towns and harbor departments about their fees and structures and how they operate. We were asked by the selectmen to formulate moorings and that type of fee structure, and we spent months and months and months. We presented our facts to the selectmen, and lo and behold, they went for the money. They didn't care what the committee had to say after all the research we did. They just wanted to fill their pocketbooks. And the selectmen have to start listening to the committees that they appoint. If they appoint knowledgeable, qualified people to these committees, which for the most part they do, it's about time that they start listening to their input. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pealosa.
I think as selectmen, we have a unique responsibility to the people of Rockport, not just to moderate between the committees, but to act as watchdogs and advocates for the interest of the townspeople as a whole. So in the past, there have been situations where different unelected members of various committees may have acted on behalf of the interests of a minority or of individual constituencies that may have been profiting from some of their decisions. So I think it's a little bit difficult to accept some of the apparent or seeming conflicts of interests that exist in Rockport on an ongoing basis, and that as a minimum, sometimes we're not deriving public benefits from some of the decisions that are taken.
Okay. Ms. George.
Another good topic. I think volunteers in Rockport are our #1 resource. I mean, look at all the people here tonight. I bet almost every person or every other person volunteers somehow in this town. I think it's very important to recognize our volunteers for the great work they do. And I think it's also very important for that group of selectmen who get their assignments to be a liaison to come to the meetings, to understand what they're doing, and report back to the Board of Selectmen meetings every other week, and to the townspeople to know what's going on. We've had things come to community preservation, and the selectmen didn't even know they were being presented to us. So I think there's a real disconnect there, and I think those liaisons need to report better back to the selectmen as a whole and to us. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dwinelle?
As far as communicating with you, the voters, and the committees, again, our volunteers are not just volunteers, they're very passionate and committed. I think a little glitch in the system is no one's communicating with other committees. We could have a united front, and it would go through the selectmen, be a much better show.
Okay. Ms. Wilkinson?
Sure. I think the liaison program is all about balance. I think it's important when someone becomes a selectman and is given their liaison assignments that they create a relationship with the committee or board or commission that they're the liaison with. And it's not about going to every meeting, and it's not about micromanaging, and it's not about your personal agenda, but it's about creating just an open line of communication between that committee or board and the Board of Selectmen, so that if the school committee wants to meet with the selectmen, that they have an open line and an open way to do that and schedule it. But it's not micromanaging. This town is run on over 200 volunteers. And if you saw I recently, for the holiday party, put together a list of some of the professions of the volunteers that we have, and it's mind-blowing, the talent and skills that we had. It would be a waste of everyone's time if we all micromanaged each other. It's all about keeping the lines of communication open.
Okay, thank you. You all have done so well. We are going to add in an extra last question here. Good job. Health insurance premiums for town employees. You're welcome. Health insurance premiums for town employees and retirees are rising 2 or 3 times as fast as the town's revenue. What is one specific thing the Board of Selectmen could do to lower the cost of health insurance? And we'll start with Mr. Pealosa.
I believe it's important for the town to take a look at its town-owned properties as well as the employee base that the town supports. So long-term, for instance, in the police department, we've had attrition that has reduced the number of police in Rockport. That's not necessarily something that everybody likes, but it is a hard decision based on the budget that's available to the town and the future liabilities that employment creates. So that may be the correct approach for a long-term sustainable path to maintaining town government. I understand that we depend on our volunteers, and I believe we should increase the spirit of volunteerism as much as possible where necessary. But I do believe that if there is a capability to do more with less, such as our assistant town administrator is taking multiple roles right now and doing a great job of it, we should look at that seriously going forward.
Okay, Mr. Dwinelle.
I'm thinking back when I was invited to be on the insurance committee. Sorry I didn't do that. I don't have any hard, fast answers on that. I would certainly look into it, and we're all living with outside interest. Doctors and patients are at the behest of insurance people, and this is another example where they seem to be running wild. Stockholders unhappy, so the rates go up. Again, it's something that I have to look at more.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hess.
Yes, I've been involved through the Finance Committee looking at health insurance for 6 years. In meeting several times with our agent that deals with the insurance companies, he told us we have the second highest per employee expense for health insurance in the state. So we know that there's some opportunities here to change things. We've gone through all kinds of options, but it needs to be the level of benefits need to be changed. We have to look at which retirees and their spouses are eligible and at what rates. We need to review the 25% number that the employees and the retirees pay. State law allows that to go to 50%. A lot of other towns are way higher than 25%. Health insurance expense for us this coming year is going to be nearly $5 million out of our $29 million budget.
Thank you. Ms. George.
I think one of the things I see coming from working in a hospital and a large group organization is that there are multiple insurance companies that will come into a town and be your insurer. And sometimes you can pick and choose which employees want which, and pick the benefits that fit their family the best, that is lowest for them, mix and match what is best for them. And sometimes it's much lower rates for people. And another thing I think is that there are a lot of opportunities to have part-time people with part-time benefits. And I don't think we have to have all full-time jobs in Rockport.
Okay. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you. I agree that insurance is one of those things. I think the best we can do is put all of our efforts into looking outside the box and seeing what there is, what our options are, how can we be creative. I disagree that increasing the percentage that our retirees paid and that our current employees pay. Our current employees and our retirees are people who live here, work here, raise their kids here. Is it fair to people who worked in this town for 30, 40 years to now raise their premiums? That to me is completely unfair and inappropriate. We have recently started to set up work groups to kind of take a look at different sections of town government and to see if there are creative ways and creative solutions, and insurance is one of these areas. Just a little plug, we're looking for an extra person or two who may know a lot about insurance to work on the insurance work group. But I think we really have to look at creative solutions and not just hike the fees of the people who work here and live here.
Okay. Mr. Paulson.
Well, this question is a tough one. Health insurance is a big deal no matter where you go, whether it's for the town, in the private sector, or whatever. The cost of going up phenomenally fast. And I don't know if there is any true answer. To have to slow down the cost, you got to spend less. That's just being practical. As far as picking on our retirees, what our retirees got, they got to keep it. There's no way I'd ever vote to take it away from the retirees. So what does that leave you? That means our current employees are going to have to suck it up a little bit. They're going to have to take either a little less, or like Miss George says, we're going to have to look for different companies that will come in here and assess the town and give us at least the same coverage, or even maybe not quite as good, but substantially less out of our pocket. It's a hard situation, but you just can't keep letting it go up 7 or 8 or 9% every year.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move on to our summary statements. You'll have 2 minutes each. And we'll start with Mr. Paulson.
Oh. All right. Well, for my summary statement, the first item will be that affordable housing in Rockport is not affordable with the rate of what our homes are worth. Like I said, people make a lot of money somewhere else. They come here and they spend it. They don't care what it costs. They're gonna have a good time and have a beautiful home and spend all their money, and then they're gonna die here. I thought they'd get a chuckle out of you. As far as Long Beach goes, my proposal would be to sell the houses and the land they sit on, and the wall, so they absorb the wall itself to whatever cost it's going to be to upkeep it from then on. Positively, no, the beach will not become private. Long Beach is for the townspeople of Rockport. It's also for the people who lease property down at Long Beach to use too. But as far as creating a private beach, never, never, never. And one of the places I keep hearing about, hiring a grant writer. Nobody seems to be able to put a price tag on it, or what to do to get somebody that can really do a good job. Well, I got a proposal here. It may sound stupid, but I'm the least educated person at this table. But I'm practical. If you're going to hire a grant writer, you give them a percentage of what they get us. If they get $20 million, they get a percentage of it. They don't get a flat fee. They don't get a weekly paycheck. They get a percentage of what they bring to the town of Rockport. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pealosa.
According to U.S. Census data, Rockport has 72% owner-occupied homes. So if we allow for Rockporters who own more than one home and may rent one, that's still probably about a quarter of all homes in Rockport not owned by people who live here. Those people love to come here because we have an incredible community. We've had it for a very long time. I fell in love with this place as soon as I came here and decided to raise my kids here. I believe that we can take that desire to be in a unique community and turn it into a revenue-generating situation for the town. If people love being in Rockport so much and they have all of the additional disposable income to buy hyper-expensive waterfront homes, there's no reason why they can't shoulder a little bit additional tax burden to benefit the rest of our population. In Rockport, we don't have almost any middle-income housing. We may have subsidized low-income housing, and pretty much everything else is way too expensive for families to move here and to keep their kids in school here. So we need to make a focus on our schools, the things that are amazing about our schools. We can create a magnet opportunity to attract more families with kids. But we should also give advantages to those people who are coming here. A residential exemption, a 20% residential exemption, by my estimate, would generate an additional $1,347,000 in fiscal year 2018, according to current town budget numbers. So I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss that with anybody who is interested in that proposal. But I think that's actually $200,000 more than we're collecting on Long Beach rent. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters, our moderator, and of course the library staff for hosting us this evening. And thank you to my opponents for this lively discussion and for stepping forward to volunteer. And thanks to all of you for taking the time out of your evening to join us here tonight and being an important part of the democratic process. It does bother me a little that there are more people here than I think there were at town meeting. I will just get that out there. If I can now ask you to do something as well when you leave. If you leave here tonight and spread the word about all of us, the candidates, our views and ideas, it will help to get even more people involved. Spread the word that being informed and voting are cool. We have accomplished a great deal in the 11 years I've been on the board, but there is always more work to do. I love this town, and I absolutely love my work as a selectman. I have had the honor of working with the most talented and hardworking town employees and volunteers anyone could ask for. As chairperson, I have required volunteers and employees to be responsible and respectful. In my opinion, these are the keys to local government. We can disagree on policy and strategy, but as long as we do it reasonably and respectfully, we can be successful. In the next few years, we do have to tackle several difficult topics: budget, insurance, capital items, but none of these are impossible if we tackle them together as a town. If you have any questions on my views or any ideas on anything you heard tonight or anything you'd like to hear, please reach out, call, email, or text me. My contact information is public and all over the town website. Thank you again for coming tonight, and I ask for your continued support on May 14th.
Thank you.
15th.
May 15th. If you show up on May 14th, just come back on May 15th.
Just don't show up on the 16th.
Ms. George.
I want to thank the League of Women. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this debate tonight. As a lifelong resident, I have a deep love of Rockport, and I'm proud to call this my hometown, just as I'm sure you all are. I have a proven continued community involvement in town committees and activities representing Rockporters. I want to continue that involvement as a selectman if elected. As a long-term manager at Addison Gilbert Emergency Department, I have experience in assessing situations and making decisions quickly. I am committed to all of our citizens, families, and our aging population. I am dedicated to make Rockport a continued, wonderful place to live, raise a family, and retire in. We are all here because Rockport is a beautiful, safe, community-oriented seaside town. I will work with all the department heads, volunteers, and residents, taking all their ideas into consideration in my decision-making. I'm a strong supporter of our public schools and their staff. Our children are truly our future here. I'm a supporter of our police, fire, DPW, and town departments. We need to support a financially appropriate new DPW garage for the health and safety of our workers. Remember, they are here for us 24/7 all year long. I'm concerned about climate change, and it's a must that we protect residents and our beaches by fixing that Long Beach wall. We also need to looking at the potential, if that wall ever failed, of losing our access on 127. One of the other things I wanted to say is that I'm the chairperson of Community Preservation Committee, and since its inception, we have gotten $9 million towards things that help the town, improving properties, all kinds of things. With a grant writer, we have the opportunity to increase that for Rockport. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hess.
Yes, I look forward to continuing being very deeply involved in the town, having been on the Finance Committee for 8 years. I got to know virtually all of the town employees and how all the departments worked, and have a good working relationship with them going right in. As I've mentioned before, our number one issue is schools. We need to come up with a program that continues and even increases the excellence of our school system. It's the most important thing we as adults do is to educate our children. In terms of Long Beach, which is one of my favorite topics, it's pretty clear that Mother Nature's going to do us in here unless we take some very specific action. We have to restructure the infrastructure there in order to make it work in all the scenarios. It is also interesting that 5 years ago we got an appraisal of the land underneath the cottages that at that time was worth about $75 million. So if we do this right and we come up with the right structure and the right deal for the existing tenants that is fair for all, I think we can pretty easily finance that. As far as other town buildings and infrastructure is concerned, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of work to do there. We have 22 buildings and a lot of seawall and roads in our infrastructure. It's hard to come up with a plan to make all this work. Just getting back to Long Beach for a moment, anything we do there must preserve the beach itself for the Rockport residents. That beach is our beach. It'll always be our beach, and it should be available to all. I'm on the Long Beach Infrastructure Committee. Actually had a meeting this afternoon. Have another meeting in a couple of days. There's a lot of work to do there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dwinelle.
I can make this short, and I will. Ditto, ditto, ditto. Thank you for all coming, for all turning in whenever you're turning this on between now and voting time. I just hope that we can all seriously work together. The business community, I support the DPW, I support pay as you throw, and I think people with young families have got quite a road to hoe. Most of us have gone through that, but still, it's a different world, and it continues to change. So let's be aware and be active, vote, and contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank all the candidates for participating so beautifully in this debate. And thank you all for coming. This is a fantastic crowd. And also thanks to all of my awesome league members who provided the questions and helped to organize the debate. Please tell your friends, please tell your family, everyone you know who lives in Rockport to go out and vote on May 15th. Thank you.